High Speed 1 Eurostar, bound for the Channel Tunnel and France, but proposed building a new high-speed railway line in our crowded island today, and a lot of people want to stop it. Compare all that with the early Victorian age, when the arrival of their new high-speed railway was a cause for celebration. Yet there could be no guarantee that this new invention would even catch on. The history book shows that in the early days, second-class carriages were uncovered, with uncomfortable, hard wooden benches exposed to the wind and the rain and to the burning sparks and soot from the engine. Even the first-class carriages, though more comfortable, had no heating and no access to toilets. But for relative speed and ease of movement, there was no real competition, and catch on they did. Most of the middle class saw the railways as an opportunity to travel beyond the confines of their local area, probably for the first time ever, to go on holiday to the seaside, for example. Most farmers saw the advantage of being able to transport their produce, especially milk, farther afield, to the big cities, and most industrialists were delighted to be able to move their goods more quickly and more cheaply than by horse-drawn wagon or canal. And when, in the late 1830s, the Liverpool to Manchester Railway Company, a hugely impressive, successful and profitable venture, began paying its shareholders annual average dividends of nearly 10%, there was no shortage of entrepreneurs ready to embrace fully this new age and invest in new railway building companies. It became manic. All that was required to build a new railway line was to persuade Parliament to pass a bill approving the route and authorising the purchase of the required land. Parliament was deluged with these bills. In 1845 alone, 240 of them, and it approved exactly half. Over 2,800 miles of new track, given the green light in just 1 year, doubling the existing network. And between 1840 and 1850, 4,600 miles of new railway lines were built. 4,600 miles in 10 years. Absolutely inconceivable today. Society, of course, was quite different then. The Victorians had precious little respect or regard for their inheritance. Look around today. In London, for example, they were happy to put a railway line on a viaduct within 50 yards of Southwark Cathedral. In York, they actually demolished sections of the Roman wall to let the trains through. The smoke still visible, so that the original station could be as near as possible to the city centre. It's been described as the most devastating single episode of destruction ever suffered by York's archaeology. There was no planning permission needed, no environmentalists, and certainly no health and safety regulations. When Ribblehead Viaduct was being built by the Midland Railway in the early 1870s, in very difficult wind-swept terrain, around 100 navvies met their deaths during its construction. There were no protest groups, no public inquiries, indeed very little concern or conception of the idea of basic human rights. OK, wealthy landowners like the surgeon Sir Astley Cooper could object. Why should our estates have to be cut up in all directions for the purpose of making an unnecessary road, he said. He then held out for as much money as he could get for his required land. The poor, though, and particularly poor tenants, was steamrollered. Even as late as the 1860s, for example, when the Midland Railway moved into St Pancras to build its station alongside the Great Northern Railway's King's Cross, the slum area of Agar Town, just west of the Great Northern's depot, was razed to the ground. The whole area transformed, and 20,000 tenants left homeless without compensation. And what was the government doing all this time? Well, the Whig and Tory governments of the 1840s, led by Sir Robert Peel and Lord John Russell, amongst others, pursued laissez-faire, non-interventionist policies. Incomprehensible today. Each new railway bill submitted was considered in isolation. No one in government ever thought to initiate a new railway line, or indeed to plan a national, rational railway network. The illustrious Brunel, for example, was even allowed initially to build his Great Western Railway to a different, broader gauge from everybody else. The government even favoured competition, being slightly worried about monopolies. So rival companies began running rival routes from city to city. The government just let them get on with it, and they certainly did that, building railways everywhere, on a scale and with a confidence that remain impressive even today. But they didn't seem to know when to stop. The city of Wells in Somerset, for example, with a population in the mid-19th century of around just 4,000 people, by 1870 had 3 stations built by 3 different railway companies. The Isle of Wight, just 15 miles by 10, by 1900 had acquired 55 miles of railway built by 8 different companies. By the outbreak of World War I, the UK was crisscrossed with railway lines, 20,000 miles of them, with barely an English village more than 20 miles from a station. Railway mania indeed, fueled by irrational, over-ambitious financial decisions. Scores of routes that even without the advent of the motor car were totally economically unsustainable. By 1961, 1,500 miles had already gone, and by the end of the decade there were only around 12,000 miles left, largely due to the rationalisation initiated by the notorious Dr. Richard Beeching. This left 8,000 miles of track and accompanying structures surplus to railway requirements. The Victorians, putting no value on the past and happy to demolish history, would doubtless have pulled them all down. But this is a different age. We call it our heritage, and we strive lovingly to preserve it. Nowadays, abandoned railway structures are more or less left alone, while some, like this viaduct, are given listed building status. OK, on prime building sites, some major railway buildings have totally disappeared. Broad Street Station in London, for example, has been lost without trace. But elsewhere, many have been put to alternative use. And nationwide, of course, around 60 railway routes like this one have been painstakingly preserved by dedicated volunteers. Men and women of all ages give up hours of their leisure time to help recreate and maintain the look and the atmosphere of our Victorian legacy. Preserve railways, listed buildings, sympathetic conversions. We dwell not on the folly of some of the Victorians' excessive railway building, nor on the hardships that were caused by the way they were built, but we seem unanimous in wanting to restore and venerate what we call the legacy of our first railway age. The first railway age, yet we are divided and reluctant about fully embracing a second.